How does this non-glutinous rice starch noodle? Turn into this crunchy snack, which happens to be the most popular snack in Japan. These crackers, called Senbei, were introduced to Japan over 1,000 years ago, and they are typically served with green tea. And this factory, called Ikedaya, has been making senbei in a traditional style outside of Tokyo for over 160 years.
創業が1865年で今からちょうど160年前になりますけれども、日本の埼玉県の草加市というところでせんべい屋を営んでおります。私が5代目の店主の池田明と申します。
Inside the factory that Akira Ikeda runs, we can see the entire senbei process from start to finish. The process starts with 100% non-glutinous short-grained rice, which is milled into a fine flour. About 90% of the factory's production is done based on orders from clients, so the amount of flour milled varies from day to day. The factory's biggest clients are the famous sumo stadiums across Japan, who order an exceptionally dense rice cracker with an intense snap. The rice is ground into flour with a metal blade, which is sharpened once every 2 years. On a normal day, the factory mills 1 ton of rice into flour. The flour needs to be exceptionally fine in order to make a consistent and uniform cracker. One person is in charge of a milling process from beginning to end. This takes about 3 hours starting at 6 a.m. After being grounded and shifted in manageable batches, the flour is stored in paper bags with the aid of a bamboo basket and a wooden hoe. Every 15 minutes throughout the milling process, freshly milled rice flour is moved to aluminum measuring containers and then poured into a machine called a jorenki. The flour is then steamed in a process similar to cooking rice in a rice cooker. The dough that results from this stage of processing can be hard or soft, depending on the amount of water added, which is changed to make different types of senbei. For this recipe, he's using 6 buckets of rice and 3 buckets of water. The precise amount of water is calibrated depending on the humidity in the air. In order to achieve the perfect consistency of dough inside a machine, the dough is kneaded and then clamped shut. Pressure builds and the dough is steam cooked for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the dough is extruded into warm water that's kept at 40 degrees Celsius so that the thick rice noodle of dough called shinko is able to cool slowly. This step removes bitterness and makes sure a hard skin doesn't form. A new factory worker monitors the temperature of the dough, which takes about 1 hour to cool. He is also monitoring the hardness and softness of the shinko throughout this stage. When the worker deems it's ready, the dough is removed from the cooling bath. Then he loads the dough into a kneading and extruding machine referred to as a nerikiri. At this stage, the extruded dough is smoother and more refined than it was when it was extruded into the warm water bath. Each step of the process is crucial for developing the dough's properties with a desired viscosity and consistency. A smoother dough will lead to the ideal texture and expand the characteristics in a final product. This elastic blob may look like soft serve, but it actually has a consistency of silly putty. Next, the dough is pounded in a millstone in a process called doutsuki. The dough is constantly moved to the center of the stone for consistent and uniform agitation. Through this process, air is knocked out of the dough and starch is extracted from the cell of the rice, forming into a polysaccharide or long chains of glucose molecules linked together. This creates a strong, elastic, and chewy dough. Throughout this stage, the factory worker has a bucket of water on hand to make sure the dough doesn't dry out too much during doutsuki. Though this specific batch of senbei has no added flavors, the senbei crackers comes in a variety of flavors, including shrimp, sesame seeds, and mustard. When making flavored senbei, these other ingredients will be added to the dough. The now firm dough is formed, and fold it into a ball and cut into 2 portions, which will each be used to make 1 batch of the senbei crackers. In this cross-section, you can see how uniform the dough is, sticky, smooth, and paste-like without any visible grains. This machine is a stamp press. At this stage, dough is loaded into the back of the machine and then pressed into long sheets. The pressed dough is stamped on a metal screen in a wooden frame. Inside the machine are cylindrical die, perforated metal plates that roll over the dough to cut and shape it into consistent circular discs. The screens with 6 rows of circular discs are inspected for any imperfections or misshaped dough. Any that don't meet the craftspeople standards are thrown back to be recut by the die. Excess dough scraps are reused from each sheet, so no dough is wasted. Here you can see the loading end of the machine before a new sheet is rolled out and cut by the die. The cut discs are dried in a floor-to-ceiling dehydrator. Small and thin senbei dry for 3 hours, while thicker rounds of dough destined for harder baked senbei dry for 4.5 hours. In the winter, these thicker rounds take up to 5 hours to dry. While the senbei doughs we have seen thus far are all round discs, there are a number of shapes that the factory can create using differently shaped dies. From small circles to flowers, praying hands, fish, and small faces. Here you can see the die being changed out for a differently shaped senbei. These are shaped as open palm prayer hands, decorative fans, and little faces. According to the rules of Soka City, only expert artisan craft people called shokunin can work in traditional industries. It usually takes more than 10 years of training and apprenticeship to acquire technical mastery and pass a test to become a shokunin. Being a shokunin signifies more than just being a skilled craftsman or artisan. It encompasses a deep philosophical approach to work and life. The metal screens that hold the senbei allow for air circulation and even drying. Historically, this step used to involve sun drying for several days. After being cut and dehydrated, the senbei are stored for 10 days in wooden boxes. The resulting discs are dehydrated, dense, and very hard like a rice puck. Next, The senbei are conditioned in a machine called a kaiten borero for 2 hours, during which they are warmed and tumbled to give them a polish. Then the senbei move through an oshiakiki, a press baking machine, in a process that takes a total of 3 minutes. Here we can see the craft person in charge of this area, loading the machine. The pucks are stacked and then suctioned up with pneumatic tubes and moved to a conveyor belt. The senbei are then flipped across a heating element that toasts them for about 5 seconds per side at a time. Halfway through the baking process, air bubbles start to form on thicker senbei, so these baking crackers are pressed to maintain shape and texture. If this didn't happen, the final crackers might fall apart and will have large bubbles that shatter when bitten into. After baking, the senbei travel down a chute and up a ramp. Then the senbei roll, standing up on their edge through a soy sauce trough. The soy sauce is pumped up from the reservoir up to the trough. As they roll, soy sauce is being applied to the cracker's perimeter. Then brushes apply more soy sauce to both faces of each cracker. Now, as you can see, the senbei have their classic golden brown color. And once these have cooled, they are ready to be packaged and sold. And that is how senbei is made.
せんべいって皆さんが思ってるよりシンプルなんですよ。米と醤油しか使ってないんで、まあいろんな工程ありますけどね、どっかで手を抜くとまずくなっちゃうんですよ。粉引きもその米どうやってブレンドするかとか、例えばね、新米が取れると水分が多いんでお水の量をちょっと減らしたりとか、古いお米が来るとお水の量ちょっと増やしてとか、臼でつくのも、もうあれ職人がこう単純にひっくり返してるように見えますけれども、ひっくり返すところでお米新香の硬さを確認してるんですよね。で、もう力が出てきたなと思ったら揚げるっていう作業とか、もう全部のところでね、実はもうものすごい職人の技が生きてるんですね。そういう意味ではうちのせんべいってめちゃめちゃ手が込んでて美味しい品物を作ってるっていう風に自負してますんで、そういうところがなんか伝わってもらえればいいなって思ってますけど。